Okay, that's good.
Well, at least it's looking a bit brighter outside now.
Yeah, yeah. It's still very windy down here in the West Country.
Yeah, it's very windy here. One of my plant pots got knocked over. So
Oh, really?
I looked at the window and there was a tragedy outside, and I ran to save the plant. Very traumatic.
So that's good. Well, people coming in all the time now, so
Yep.
so that's good. That's good. And I expect Howard's explained, Hannah, that we have a range of people from across the UK.
And I can see Duncan has come in as a participant. I did not know he was attending.
Who's that? Sorry.
Mr. Duncan King.
Oh yes, yes. I can see one of your colleagues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spying mission.
Yeah. Picking up on me.
Yeah, we have a cross section from across the UK, across the supply chain, and housing, building, infrastructure, FM. So, yeah.
Marvellous. Very exciting.
So yes, it's not midday yet, so I think we'll give it another couple of minutes before we kick off. Are you doing the house rules today, Howard?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Though I think these days most people know the house rules. They've been on enough of these Zoom calls these days.
I just think it's a good idea to just
No, I agree.
quickly recap so that we're all on the same page.
Well, Hannah said she wanted to take questions at the end, so I'll tell people that. So, you know, keep the questions coming and they'll be dealt with at the end. So
That's fine. That's fine.
Otherwise, we'll never end up my presentation, Andrew. You know I won't get through it if I keep on stopping. Just give me a thorough run and then we can potentially hit the goal.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It's a critically important topic area. So
Quite.
thanks for joining us. The numbers are growing all the time. So we'll just leave it. I think it's only just after midday. If we could leave it a couple of minutes, just to allow more people to come in, that would be good.
My cat is sleeping opposite me and he's looking all very innocent at the moment, which is a complete lie because yesterday he came in absolutely covered in bird feathers, head to toe. I had to pick them out. I had to pick them all out. And I was just about to go into a workshop as well. And there was my cat molting as he walked. It was appalling behaviour. But I don't have a rodent problem around me. He definitely clears the area.
doesn't bring them back as gifts.
He does try to. But thankfully, he's taken to announcing it. So he always goes, meow, like that, very specific meow. And then I know he's got to stay away. So we're a little protected.
Okay, I think we'll make a start, Howard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then people can join us. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in a series of webinars that have been organised by Constructing Excellence in the Southwest, in the Midlands, in Wales, and now in the Northeast, together with the Housing Forum and the Structural Timber Association, bringing you these webinars each Tuesday and Friday at midday, proving very popular and very useful. Today, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by Hanna Clarke from the Construction Products Association, and we're going to be looking at that very important topic of quality and compliance. There can be no doubt that post-Grenfell and the Hackett Review, quality and compliance has gone way up the priority list and probably sits right at the top alongside net zero as a key subject matter for our sector to consider. So the next hour is going to be very useful for all of us, I'm sure. Before I ask Hanna, though, to speak, I'm just going to hand over to Howard to just say a few words about the house rules, but as we've been discussing just now, we're probably already aware of them. But just to be on the safe side, Howard, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yep, good morning to everyone. Three things I think that are key to bear in mind is first that you have a Q&A menu on your toolbar. This will allow you to ask questions of Hannah. Now, she has asked that questions be posted and she'll take them at the end of her presentation. Meanwhile, you can continue to use the chat pane and by all means say who you are. And that would give an idea to not only to Hannah, but to everyone else who's attending. And you can use it during the presentation to speak to each other. I would ask perhaps if you could keep the questions to the Q&A menu as it's all in one place. The third thing we have is a hands up facility, and the hands up facility I probably will use when we come to the questions, because people can put a hand up and they can ask their question live. So without much to do, I'm now going to hand over to Hannah. Welcome, Hannah. Over to you.
Hey, lovely. Thank you ever so much, Howard. It's an absolute pleasure to be presenting here today at Leaders Meet. My name is Hanna Clarke. I'm from Construction Products Association and I am the Digital and Policy Manager. And when I was asked to do this by Andrew and Howard, they were very kind and sent over a lovely information pack about how to make this a really exciting and interactive webinar. And what it did say was don't do too many slides. But I am a creature of habit and I love a slide, so I have decided to do some slides anyway. So apologies, but you're going to get a slideshow here. I'm quite happy for those slides to be disseminated if that's what you would require. And hopefully my dulcet tones will keep you all energized, and I'll be very excited to see what kind of conversation we can have at the end of this. I expect this presentation will take between 20 and 30 minutes for me to do. So without further ado, I shall try and get the presentation up, and hopefully everybody can see that. Right, we're in the wrong place. I'm just going to move it right back to the start. Okay, well, it is exceptionally kind that I've been invited to do this presentation on the future of quality in construction. And I do appreciate at a time like this, with the situation with the pandemic, that maybe the future of quality isn't necessarily the topic that everybody really wants to concentrate on right now. Especially given that everyone's really trying to keep their heads above water at the moment. That all said, there are some real things coming down the road. The train is on the tracks and it's coming, and if we don't really look up and look at what the future is going to do, we could find ourselves in a bit of a pickle. So I think it's really great that we've got so many people signing up to this seminar, and hopefully it can outline what things we've got on the horizon, mainly from a Construction Products Association perspective with the projects that we are engaged in, but also giving you a bit of an idea of what the horizon looks like. So just a bit about the CPA first. We represent 87% of the industry by value, that is of construction product manufacturers and distributors in the UK, not 85% like in this out-of-date infographic, it's appalling, but yes, and we do see that 78% of all construction products used in the UK are made in the UK. So for me, that's very exciting. We represent such a vibrant part of the UK economy. So if we look at quality in construction, especially as what has led up to the current picture, it's a little bit of an embarrassing picture, frankly. And really the microscope has really been held over the construction industry, especially with disasters such as Ronan Point, Lacknell House, the Scottish schools, and of course the Grenfell Tower fire. And we are finding that the public really don't have an awful amount of faith that the construction industry can really put forward quality assets and quality builds. And the reasons for this are multiple. One of the reasons, of course, is we're not one industry. We are any number of multiple industries. So when government turns around to us and says, oh, industry must fix this, it's a little bit tricky because there's so many of us. And in CPA, I work with 12 people. It's hard enough to communicate with them. Nevertheless, everyone quite across the sector. So there is a real challenge to us to be able to bring that unified approach. And on top of that, we're not a fully digitalized industry either. And we can see through other industries that have gone into full digitalization, the level of quality, the efficiency, the ability to innovate through data mapping. It's so high, it's so much an integral part of that part of the industry moving forward. So we are very challenged that we don't have one common consistent language that we're able to communicate through. We also have a huge challenge with our regulatory system, not only because the regulations themselves have been challenged from government, in fact, to try and deregulate the sector and not provide that level of oversight that is so necessary, that policing that is required, but also through how that regulation system and the guidance that underpins it all works together. That can be quite challenging, and there's clearly not the right level of education about how to consider those regulations and take responsibility over those requirements. It's very clear that value is not what we want value to be in this sector. Value engineering is a dirty term that has it doesn't reference what other parts require value to look like. So we have some really difficult scenarios when we're trying to get things done at low levels of cost and time, and quality is the last part of the puzzle that can be considered. So it's a very challenging picture that we have overall to deal with here. But I also wanted to just really quickly pick up on insurance here. We have a scenario where the insurance industry want to move away from the construction sector. In 2018, insurers came together and recognized that PII in particular is the worst in the UK other than the US, in the entire world. So insurers started moving away from PII across the board in all of the markets. And then, of course, with Grenfell, what was recognized was that two things. One is that we don't have a real clear understanding of what the risks look like, and they were highlighted through Grenfell. So insurers were like, we can't put a name to what the risk looks like, especially when we're talking about high-rise residential buildings, when we're talking about fire, when we're talking about cladding, especially in those areas. Now, insurers don't have a real clear picture about what construction does, and also we don't have a real clear way of demonstrating that we are consistently mitigating risks. So those two things really fight against each other. And so we have seen some really worrying behaviours when it comes to insurance, and many people are feeling the effects of that. Now, the government is working with insurers to educate them precisely about what construction does. And in some parts of the sector, we're starting to see a positive impact by that, not quick enough. But it is necessarily coming. But there is a place where we need to bring the levels of quality and the demonstration thereof up to a higher standard, so that we can get into a place where we're far more comfortable with being able to have that conversation with insurance and being able to say, yes, there are risks, these are mitigated, and we can prove it. And then we can see a much better place with insurers all round, a more stable environment and market. So, many of you will be aware that there has been several initiatives, especially through governments, that are really pushing forward a completely different approach to how we deal with competence and compliance and quality within the sector. I would hope that a good majority of everybody who is on this call understands a little bit at least about the Hackett reports. And out of the Hackett report came 53 recommendations about how the changes we needed to make to the construction industry, and all 53 recommendations have been taken forward by governments in a very serious way. It is serious enough that while we're dealing with this pandemic, the building safety programme is one of the very few that hasn't had resources taken away from it. We've seen the implementation plan and the government response to how to reform a building safety regulatory system being pushed through into, and the building safety bill, the proposed outcomes, the immediate first primary legislation is due to come before Parliament this summer, potentially as early as this month in June. So this particular system is really challenging how we think about the entire regulation system, how we challenge how we consider responsibility right through the creation of the assets into the occupation of the assets. We are dealing with a new way of considering competence. We are dealing with a new way of considering procurement, and obviously products, and the golden thread of information. How do we transfer that information right through a build? And we're not just talking about what is in the build, we're also talking about the intent behind the things in the build and those who have created the build. That's very important, that we have holistic pictures that we're setting up. Also, we saw in 2018 the release of the construction sector deal. And out of that, 72 million had been allocated to the Construction Innovation Hub that is made up of BRE, CIH, and the CDBB, the Centre for Digital Built Britain. And the work that is being put out through those initiatives is all around modern methods of construction and the digitalisation of the industry. And one of those projects, the Lexicon project, has been done in partnership with the CPA and is talking about how do we standardize product data, how do we make that interoperable, computer readable, and most important, how do we make it comparable? That's where the real safety of this comes from. So that's a really interesting part of the sector. And I also want to bring up, most recently, just the week before last, came out the Construction Leadership Council Roadmap to Recovery. Just a bit about the Construction Leadership Council quickly. This has really come together in the last 3 months since the pandemic. I think, you know, obviously we're all very challenged by the pandemic, but one of the most positive things to come out of that is a unique coming together of industry. We had a coming together of industry when after Grenfell happened. That is absolutely true, but it has been stepped up and then some through the Construction Leadership Councils working with governments to try and get industry back into a place where it is once again in a recovered situation, vibrant and working and safe. That's very important. And part of their recovery plan, which is key for us to be looking at here, is that it's really talking about restart, reset, and reinvent. We're not just talking about getting back to where we were before. The idea is that we get into a position where we are in a far stronger place, where we are working to a far higher quality and have far higher stability. We don't want to be in a situation where this kind of enormous impact happens again, we don't want to be able to fall so hard. So this strategy is not about getting back to how we were doing. It is about delivering much higher outputs than we have been thinking before. So quality, quality, quality is all over many various different government departments and is being pushed forward in a level of synchronization that we have not seen before. I'm not going to talk too much about the Hackett reports. It's a fairly old report at this point. I really think that a good majority of people have either read it or know quite a lot of things about it. If you haven't, it is such an important report that when I came back into isolation from work, I took two things. I took my laptop and I took the Hackett report because I reference it about once a week. I feel like I might be able to quote parts of it, but please don't test me on that. But what I do want to pick up really key from this report is that some people think it doesn't apply to them. And that's because it was really about dealing with buildings that are high-rise residential buildings, and majority it's about fire. And while that is true, that was the remit of it, the conclusions are quite clear in their statement that you can't really fix construction in isolation. You can't choose one little part of it and think that if you fix that part, it's going to work. The construction industry is far too integrated and complicated for us to deal with it. So quite a lot of the outputs that are coming from the government response take that forward. Where they're being specific to certain parts, it's with the view to expand in the future. And a good majority of the work that's coming out of it is still towards the entire construction industry. So if you're not aware of what's going on with the Hackett report, that is a real key thing. Do get engaged with all the stuff coming out of the Building a Safety program, because it is stuff that will have impact right across the board. One of the big projects that has come out of the Hackett work, and this is a really industry-led project, is the competence work. So this is made up, this is a working group coming from the industry response group, and it brings together a really a large cross-section of industry. And within that particular report that was released last August, what it outlines is a new structure for competence, an overarching competence system, which was developed by WG0, led by Scott Steedman. And within that, underneath that, we have outlined 11 professions and what they need to do to step up their game within their individual roles, what competence needs to look like them. And then on top of that, again, you have what is the working group 12, that's the CPA working group, and we're dealing with product competence. So that is the competence for everybody right across the industry who is dealing with products, not just installing products, but also procuring them, supervising with them, designing, maintaining, even for insurers and other people who are part of the puzzle. So it's really looking at how do we change product competence for everyone. And we've developed a system where you can consider product competence in 5 different levels. The lowest level being where you just think about products as they are on a singular basis, and then the more competent you are, the more you understand how it works as part of a system in different environments, over life, over cost, and from an environmental perspective, whole life. So that way we can have a look at a picture of all of the roles over all of the RIBA stages, and be able to pretty much diagnose where you need to have a level of competence to do that interaction. So that is all within this interim report. Definitely look at the, it's beautiful, but we really need a good level of engagement because we are trying to assign levels of competence to everyone. We have, the CSG has a report coming out this summer, a final report. I put it in inverted commas there, because really it's an implementation plan. The work will not stop. We haven't fixed competence. So that work is going to be continuing for 5-10 years to be able to get some real transitional changes right through the industry. And one of the things that the overarching group has done is they've also put together a benchmark competence framework that's also going to be put out in the final report. So what that is saying is, what are the rules for a competence framework? What are the rules for any competence scheme? Because we don't want to really just cover the competences that we have covered in this report. We need to make sure we're all working at the same standard, and we need to be able to bring other sectors in. WG12 are putting a summary into this final report, but because we're covering so many different roles and responsibilities throughout the sector, we have decided that we need to do more research and development before we put out what we would consider a final report, or an implementation plan, if you will. So that's going to be coming out in Q4 of this year. But we're also going to be putting that out for consultations so that we can give industry more detail, more level of information about the structure that we're putting in place. And we really want to hear back from the rest of industry about how practical that is, and make sure that we are definitely doing this in the right collaborative, non-siloed approach that is necessary. One of the other projects that Construction Products Association are leading on is the Marketing Integrity Group. And this is really about creating a scheme that makes marketing information of products clear, unambiguous, transparent, and rigorous. That is really what we're aiming to do. So we put out a survey last year. We have published our initial findings, and now the Marketing Integrity Group are working to put together a voluntary code or scheme. And the idea is that we'll have manufacturers and anybody who is putting a product to market and presenting that information, and in whatever guise that information looks like, we would want them to sign up to this code and have the stamp of approval. We have reached this level. We are producing our information with this level of vigor behind it. Vigor or rigor, one of the two. And what we have is we've started presenting what we are envisaging for this code to different parts of industry, and the level of positive response that we have got has been really, really high and really exciting. But we envisage that we're going to have people sign up that they will not be using products unless they get those levels. And we're also having discussions with governments, with their commercial ventures, to see if they will be signing up, because we really need the mechanisms in here to make sure that we have product information properly communicated, and that we don't have some woolly conversations or ambiguous wording. That is really the aim of this particular game. I just want to point quickly to one of our other projects. We have been commissioned by MHCLG in partnership with PRP and Adroit to really review products, the product standards regime and the testing, and to see where the holes sit. So while Marketing Integrity Group is talking about taking standards information and displaying it correctly, this is talking about the standards information itself, the testing procedures. And this is really for us, it's not going to be, we're not fixing the system in this particular project. What we're doing is we're putting together essentially a gap analysis and a kind of prioritization framework to hand over to the Construction Product Standards Committee, which is going to be set up by MHCLG. That is what this particular project aims to do. So hopefully we're starting to close up the holes one by one about how products are put together, communicated, and how people understand products as an entity. And that allows it to be, when it comes to a regulator considering what level of responsibility people should take with things, we can't have our sector giving levels of misinterpretation that they can point to. We need people to say, okay, we've got everything in front of us, and now it's our responsibility to making the correct decisions about how to be taking it forward. One of the other things I want to quickly point to, just to give you an idea of this, how competence and compliance is being taken forward in every strand of the sector at the moment, is this is taken straight from the CLC Road to Recovery map. So apologies for the God knows how many words is going on in this slide. But what you can pick out of here is in all of the different horizontal groups, these are the various, these remits talk about what working groups can come out of them. And you can pick up themes here, lots about zero carbon, lots about efficiency and digitalization and leveling up. There is a real strong move into the direction of bringing us into a place where competence, compliance, quality is right at the forefront of the way we're thinking. And of course, when we're talking from an environmental perspective, that is absolutely necessary for everybody. So that's really good to see that coming out of the CLC. And then just quickly, because I have been talking for quite a while now, just the other touch points to on the horizon where this all links up. We do have the Building Safety Bill coming. As I said, that is going to cover a lot about responsibilities. It's going to talk about regulators that have the power to police. And that is going to be so crucial when we're looking about how we're putting our information together in future. We have the combustible cladding ban. Now, many of you will be aware of this. It came out in 2018. We spent 2019 getting confused by it and raising a lot of concerns to MHCLG because it wasn't quite it wasn't so easy to put that into a practical workplace with some of the confusions coming out of that. So they have said they are expanding on the ban, but also what we're dealing with there is some clarification around the areas that have been causing industry problems. So we're going to look at two things when we get the results of that consultation later this year. We're probably going to expand the combustible cladding ban into areas which are buildings which are between 11 and 18 meters, and other buildings such as hotels, hostels, hospitals, so on and so forth, anywhere that people speak. But we're also going to look at a cleaning up of the rules that already exist, make sure that we've got the right exclusions in there and there aren't so many problems being caused. There's also a lot of work being done on third-party accreditation, and Duncan King, who is on this particular call, I noticed, he is sitting on the BRAC working group dealing with that. So they are going to be looking at, in the first instance, third-party accreditation of so that is all within the picture of what MHCLG intend to do. Apologies if my presentation isn't coming through correctly. I've just got a notice that my internet is unstable. We also have a statutory list for safety critical products. And what that is it's saying if your product has any potential to impact on safety as part of a system or an isolation, and it doesn't sit under CPR, currently MHCLG do not have a way to prosecute if that product is not being manufactured in the correct way. So it's about bringing those products that aren't in the CPR under another regime. When we say safety critical, that pretty much covers all products in my mind, and they're all going to be taken into a scenario where they can be reviewed and regulated. That's very important. So we've got the construction product, regulator that is going to sit over those. I have talked a little bit about golden thread, so I won't go into that much more detail. And we do have the review of approved document B, and the other approved documents are also going through review, as is there being a review of the actual regulations. And we have various digital projects. So for CPA, we've got the lexicon project that I mentioned earlier. We also have the digital object identifier that we've been doing in collaboration with NBS and BSI. That's about attaching a barcode or a QR code or a nano chip to an actual product that you can scan while it's in situ, while it's installed, and be able to get the product information up on that. So that's a very important project. We also have the supply chain digital twin. Can you link up all of the supply chain in one procurement tool and have APIs that push that information into the build so you can connect up with your BIM, with your Revits and all sorts. You don't want procurement to be the place where you're losing information. It needs to be a place where you're gathering information instead. And certainly across the landscape, we've got many other digital projects and lots of digital twin projects. And that is something that we're going to see down the road, that becoming far more part of the status quo. Everybody will be engaged in that. That's being very strongly pushed at the moment. So it's all about a non-siloed approach, and it's all about collective responsibility and ownership. So that was a bit of a whirlwind tour. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you could hear it all very well. And then I am quite happy to see if we can have a conversation about it.
Hi, Hannah. Many thanks. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, so I can read them out to you. One comes from Simon Shuka Hafran. Hannah, good afternoon. You're absolutely correct about poor quality and gaining the trust of our clients, the public. What role can the CPA play in raising the level of quality and therefore satisfaction for new home buyers, where rework is very common and long snagging lists are very publicly discussed in the general media?
Well, I mean, Construction Products Association, obviously, we're very engaged with trying to push forward more forward-thinking approaches. Snagging it's the age-old question, is that when I was working on site, oh my God, snags was such an issue. And we used to spend more time dealing with snagging than we did with the actual build. It was a real trauma. Snagging, I think, is really about putting the correct processes in beforehand. You want to be capturing that level of understanding about what you're building, making sure that the design is correct and making sure that the construction is correct and the communication of those two things are correct. So that's where digital can really play a part. When it comes to the actual build itself, once it's in situ, we are hoping things like digital object identifiers really is going to make it easy for those in occupation to be able to really clearly understand what is sitting on the building. So yes, it is CPA who's driving some of these things, but it really isn't something that we can do on our own. That is certainly a far bigger question. So that's why it's important for us to engage with the other players, like such as with the industry response group, where we're made up of Build UK, CIC, and ourselves and government, pushing these things forward, working to try and make sure we don't have those issues, and also with the Innovation Hub. And also I will note that with Innovate UK, one of the outputs from that particular project is specifically about trying to stop snagging. Now, it's not our project, but we are aware that it's on the horizon. So it's worth looking up Innovate UK and what their projects are, because I know there's one specifically about snagging, and it's definitely something that needs a lot of fresh thinking around it.
I hope that answers the question for you, Simon, but if not, you can put your hand up and we can return for a follow-up maybe. I've got one here from Rob Lamb. It's got a few statements in it. So, product manufacturers' claims of performance typically do not represent performance in use. Example is put in bracket is similar to overstated miles per gallon performance of cars. A comment in trade press today regarding Grenfell inquiry, Neil Crawford, former employee of Architect Studio E, alleged Arconic and Celotex had been deliberately misleading with their information on the products. It's masquerading horse meat as beef lasagna and people bought it, he said. What can we expect from the work being done on quality to address this issue?
Well, I can't speak for the inquiry, of course. That's completely outside of my remit, and I wouldn't be able to make any comments on that itself. But we do 100% agree that there are products that are, so shall we say, overrepresented, which is precisely why we have put the Marketing Integrity Group in place, and that's the particular question that they're working on. What we want to see is, if you say it's going to do something, you have to be able to back that particular statement up directly, and that can happen in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's not even about an attempt to mislead, it's just a marketing requirement and maybe a lack of understanding from the marketers. That's why we're also looking at the competence of our marketers as well. So we need to fix the competence of our marketers, and we also need to make sure they're not making these grandiose statements, especially. So I saw a product not long ago that said it was engineered to optimum sustainability. I'm not sure what that means, but it's a disturbing sentence, because what you need is qualifiers right through it. So that's what we're trying to get, qualifiers all the way through it, and competence of the people who are transmitting that information.
Okay, Rob, I hope that answers your question. If not, please put your hand up, and we'll have a follow-up on that for you. Next one I've got is, why can't the 11 or 18 metre height rule be removed altogether? That will remove any conflict.
I mean, it's definitely a regular part of the discussion, is why are we putting these arbitrary guidelines in? And it really does comes back to risk mitigation, isn't it? If you're able to get out of a building easily, then you're probably not going to have the same concerns when you're putting certain things on the exterior of your building. And I certainly think that there is a place for some of these materials. If we remove the guidelines completely, there would be some other materials in which can be used perfectly safely, which have far more better environmental outputs. And you know, it would seem to me that there's more sides of the picture than just fire when you're constructing something. That said, it's all about realistically mitigating that risk, isn't it? So I think within reason, if it's not safe to put on a building, you shouldn't be putting it on a building. That should be what it goes for. But the overall consensus is that I think it's just to extend to 11 metres and other in scope buildings, but it's not really. That's what the conversation is.
Okay, thank you. If you want to come back on that, Phil, please do. Meanwhile, actually, Simon has come back to us on the first question. He says, excellent answer. Thank you, Hannah. The trades and site management need to play a greater part as they take an accredited and competent product and finish it with a lower than required quality, hence the large snagging. I don't know whether you want to comment on that anymore.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, it says, excellent answer. Thank you, Hannah. The trades and site management need to play a greater part as they take an accredited and competent product and finish it with a lower than required quality, hence the large snagging. Oh,
it's so important. That installation is so part of this picture, and it's quite a regular conversation when you're trying to unpick this. So when we're dealing with the competence from a product perspective, where we have systems that are often brought to market, then we can start playing with some quite interesting ideas. For example, when they're often put in place with a warranty or a guarantee, then we can try and underpin those warranties and guarantees with the competence structure and say, if you do not fulfill the requirements that are set out in these warranties and guarantees, if you can't provide that level of competence, then we will remove those warranties and guarantees. So we're looking at the mechanisms of how to do that. And on the other side of it, I'm well aware that the supervisors profession, the competence work that they're doing, and I believe it's being done in conversations between that and constructing excellence, which I think is going to be exciting, is really looking at what is the competence of oversight. And they're also talking about a kind of clerk of works 2.0. And clearly we need that consistent way of talking, the consistent third eye of oversight when we're talking about quality. It's definitely the case.
Thanks very much. I've got a question from James Barnfield here. What are the barriers to implementing regulatory controls in quality assurance in all construction? And he puts in bracket contractor declarations, on-site material records that are comparable to the passive house standard. Then there's another question, do the highlighted industry reviews acknowledge this? Lastly, ask, what is the likelihood of digital object information becoming compulsory? Don't know if you want to ask the first one, the comparable to passive house, and I'll remind you of the other two if you want. Over to you.
I'm not very educated in all things. I'm a jack of all trades, if you will. So I'm afraid I don't know about the passive house. What was that one? Passive house trade? Did you say?
Yes. The word they use is. What are the barriers to implementing regulatory controls in quality assurance in all construction that are comparable to the passive house standard?
House standard, right. Well, I tell you what the barriers are from that standard put to one side, because I'm not educated on it. But the barriers of putting it around to all trades is literally right now time and money and priority. But the fight that we're fighting is that it does need to have oversight in all of the various different professions, trades, every single one. But, you know, we don't want to bite off the whole apple at once. So the first stage is to deal with the high risk buildings. And then once we've got those regulations, that oversight there, then hopefully we are pushing still to expand so that we cover the entire industry. And I think that is the necessary approach.
Does that answer, do you think, the question of do the highlighted industry reviews acknowledge this? And what is the likelihood of digital object information becoming compulsory?
So I think everybody that we've been working with is very, very much of the same mind. And you know, when the competence report came out, that was the common theme of feedback, and that's gone back really strongly to government as well. It needs to be a whole culture change and a whole system change. So that is definitely acknowledged. But the digital object information, if you're talking about the digital object identifier, the DOI, that I was talking about, I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to be compulsory. That's coming into a state where it's got a commercial offering. I'm not convinced that so this particular project started before I joined, so I'm not convinced that we have mechanisms to make sure that that becomes compulsory in there. But that is, I'm sure, what we are aiming for overall. But quite happy to extend that to be able to look into that and see what drivers we've got in place. And quite happy to have that conversation if you want to email me.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I hope that answers it, James. Please come back if not. Next one I have, a bit of praise here. Excellent webinar, thank you. What is the timescale, please, for the Marketing Integrity Group's Code of Conduct?
Okay, the Code of Conduct. So we intend to have our report of what that scheme, what that code, and what that vision looks like out by Q4 this year. And once we've got the feedback on that and we've been able to process it, we are also looking for funding. So at the moment we're in conversation, because what we think we need is a body to be able to administrate that. We need to make sure it is properly policed and governed. And so we are looking to see implementation of that in 2021.
Okay, thanks very much. One more question here. I've got Richard Chakansky. How can you convince construction clients, particularly those in the public sector or other clients, when money is tight, the tangible benefits of value rather than lower cost?
So that is very, very tricky, because have to be well aware, all of us, that the immediate upfront cost of all of this change and all this quality is going to definitely go up the line, and as it well should be. So it's very tricky. We have a couple of ways of doing that. One is by visualization can really help with that, because when you can visualize everything and you can make it clear where the benefit sits. So one of the things we were looking at with the linking up the supply chain is not just to link it up from the perspective of making it easier to go in one place, but also that you can take the tangible benefits of what those products are doing, keep that same information going right through to operation, and then you've got some real life data that actually shows precisely what quality products are doing in operation as opposed to non-quality products are doing in operation. So it's about being able to communicate where value actually sits within that journey. Also, we do have the regulators coming in, and regulators are going to start making it very, very clear that this requirement is to the client. We've got the cascade of what responsibility looks like. It sits with the client, the principal contractor and principal designer, and the building safety manager. And the requirements are going to be very, very different to what they've been before. So there's a lot of work still to be done, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of, we need to be making our clients' competence, and one of the big discussions we're having in the competence steering group is how do we get them much more into the picture. But we do have the local government associations involved and lots of the big housing federations. So we have got them into that conversation, and they are fully part of this approach. But there's a lot of extra work to be done, because I'm well aware that that's only one sector. It's a real challenge, but definitely something to focus on.
Super, Hannah. That's the last question we've currently got. If there's any more questions, please pose them. I don't know whether... I've got a hands up from Rob Lamb, so I think I'm going to open his mic, and let's see if we can we'll get him to come live. Just bear with me just a moment.
That's Bob Davis you've brought in.
Yeah, it's all right. I brought in, I think we've got Rob now. No, yeah.
Yeah, Rob's in.
Yeah, Rob's in. You could ask your question now, Rob.
Yeah, it's just a follow-up. I thought I'd wait and see if you had any time available to follow up on the question I asked earlier before I did. Yeah, there's a huge amount going on, obviously, really important stuff that you're describing, Hannah, and obviously all very welcome in terms of driving quality. In terms of the question about performance statements from manufacturers, clearly where there's false claims, that's a straightforward issue to address. Where there's unqualified statements of performance, clearly that's something to be addressed. But probably a bit more difficult or challenging maybe where there's statements of performance that are factual based on tests that are done in lab conditions that are not necessarily able to be replicated in use. So they're not false claims, they're not unqualified because it's a test, but in reality, achieving the performance as stated in use is extremely challenging. So I wondered if the work being done by the Integrity Group is addressing that aspect as well.
In a way we are, but what we're encouraging people to do is, testing itself isn't within remit of that group, but what is in with remit is to say what that testing does. So if you're going to say a claim about performance, it must be about what that test has done. So specifically, what are the limitations of that test? And the reality is that when you deal with product testing, it's never going to demonstrate performance in a realistic situation. It's only a flag, it's only a marker, and it should never be characterized as doing more than that. So what we're trying to make very clear within this scheme is about saying precisely what that test is doing, and if there's any further workings about projecting what that test can mean, to make that clear as well. So you are defining what the test does and what the application is and how that information has been extrapolated to get to that position. That is very important indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. If there's any more questions, please put your hand up. I think I'll ask Andrew if he would like to join us again. You there, Andrew?
Yes, I'm here, and I just think we are coming to the end of our hour, so I think we ought to express our thanks as we normally do in this virtual way, Hannah. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your experience, knowledge and expertise with us. Very, very helpful and useful as always. Thank you to Howard and John for hosting it. Next week on Tuesday, we have Stuart Dalgarno joining us from Stuart Milne Group. They are members of a project called AIM-CH, which is looking at industrialised housing. When we come out of COVID-19, as we are now in a recovery plan, I think there can be no doubt that we need to get back onto the house building front as quickly as possible. The need for 300,000 houses a year hasn't gone away. So on Tuesday, we're going to be looking at that housing crisis. We're going to be looking particularly at the AIM-CH project, which is looking at a 3-year project looking at industrialised housing. So I hope you can join us with Stuart Dalgarno on Tuesday. I don't see any more questions, Howard. So without further ado, I'm going to wish everyone a very good afternoon. Have a very pleasant weekend, and hope to see you again next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.